How can UDL principals support reclassification for students with disabilities? Did you know that 20% of K-12 students are English learners? 45% of students live in households in which a dialect of English is spoken? That 50% of students with disabilities are Hispanic, and that Latino and special ed students are overrepresented in a group of students who do not complete the A through G requirements. The CELT, which was established in 2001 through No Child Left Behind, was established to determine English proficiency and develop high levels of academic language. Under current state law, EL students must participate in the CELT annually until they are reclassified. Modifications are alternative means of assessing English language proficiency of students with disabilities. Because such alternate means of assessments change what the CELT measures, students receive the lowest obtainable score, or the loss. Caution needs to be used when interpreting the results of the loss because modifications will lower the overall score. The lowest obtainable score means that a student will receive the lowest scale score possible in any domain. So if a student receives a 550 on the reading section of the CELT, which is a 3, they'll receive a 491, which is the lowest scale score of that 3. Caution needs to be used when interpreting the loss because it affects the school ranking, and also when districts you have strict reclassification criteria, it makes reclassification seem out of reach for many, many students. But why is reclassification so important? Well, let's look at the data. If students do not reclassify by middle school, they will become long-term English learners. When students do not reclassify, it lowers the percentage points of a student earning a high school diploma by 5%. For some students, not reclassifying makes a high school diploma unobtainable. Without reclassification, EL students do not get elective classes. They receive ELD, but oftentimes these classes are filled with rote instruction of remedial skills. That makes reclassification much like algebra by 8th grade. It becomes a mental gatekeeper for EL students. Without reclassification, their options become limited. This is because the Willis complex conflicts theory. A student's success is related to the perception of access to economic or academic opportunity. When students feel like they have access to opportunity, they perform better. Lack of choice in class schedule in middle school negatively affects a student's perception of self and limits a student's engagement. Does lack of engagement, control over class choice, and negative self-perception that a student feels because they do not reclassify attribute to high dropout rates? Do LTELs and special ed students fill the school to prison pipeline? And is there data that supports this theory? California dropout statistics in 2012 and 2013 show that ELs and special ed students are among some of the highest subgroups that drop out. Studies demonstrate that students with disabilities and ELs also have lower rates of post-secondary schooling and employment and are overrepresented in the criminal justice system. It has been difficult finding data that includes the combined subgroups, but a report from PPIC implies that the amount of students that fall into both categories is significant enough to affect reclassification data. This quote from the report by PPIC demonstrates that the combined subgroups are significant. So according to the Public Institute of California, while reclassified students have much better academic outcomes, stricter district requirements have also shown very little effect on how reclassified students perform academically after reclassification. So what makes the largest impact in an EL's academic success? Students who reclassify before they leave elementary school perform better than students who reclassify in middle or high school. The question is, can applying UDL principles help reclassify more ELs and special ed students? The answer is yes, with accountability, choice, and evidence-based practices. My recommendations are that for accountability, school districts monitor the combined subgroups of EL and special ed students. That choice is offered to students through electives, and these electives use evidence-based practices that support English language acquisition for EL students. Districts should follow the minimum state recommendations for reclassification criteria, and by applying UDL principles into ELD instruction practices, then more students will be engaged in school and less likely to drop out. Incorporating UDL practices into ELD instruction, we can develop an educational pathway that leads to college and career readiness instead of a pipeline to prison for our most marginalized students.